And let's start off with the Detroit Lions. Isaac Teslaa was pretty much the biggest standout here. He was a player that the Lions pretty much, sold 2 third-round picks in the future for to go up and get. He played 35 snaps yesterday, 19 routes run, 5 total targets, and he's really looked the part so far. Isaac Teslaa grew up as a, Detroit Lions fan. I believe he grew up in that area. And so, the hometown kid is now getting a shot to make plays. And it looks like he's really making the most out of that opportunity. Right now, this is a receiver room outside of St. Brown and Jameson Williams. That's kind of thin. You have Dwayne Eskridge. I'm looking at Miami, the other team on the other side. You have Khalif Raymond, Dominic Lovett, Jackson Meeks, Tom Kennedy. Some of these guys, you don't even know who the heck they are. And so he's got a real shot, guys, to get that wide receiver 3 role. I want to pose a question to you, Matt, and I'll let you kick it off. With the ascension of Isaac Teslaa so far, the first few weeks, is it crazy to say that Jameson Williams' production, who a lot of people are really banking on having, that big time breakout this year, is it safe to say that his breakout might be in jeopardy slightly with Teslaa coming into town?
Absolutely, it is, in my opinion. I mean, we have to step back and look at the transactions the team made. They traded 3 third-round picks to go and get Isaac Teslaa back in the draft in May. Teslaa is a guy that kind of came onto the scene late. Coach and we started to talk about him probably a week or two before the Senior Bowl back in February. We watched the tape from him at Arkansas. We thought, man, this guy's kind of interesting. He's big. He's quick. He's got great, solid hands. Then he shows up at the Senior Bowl and he balled out, man. He played really, really well against some good competition. Goes into the game, gets a couple 2-point conversions. He might have scored. I can't remember. But he looked well. And then, of course, we fast forward into the draft season. We get to the combine. He had one of the highest athleticism scores out of any wide receiver in the entire draft. So it's not surprising to kind of see that show up on the field now. Jameson Williams is a guy, he's a burner. He can absolutely do that. He'll be the one that will score 25 to 30 points probably once or twice this year. Will Teslaa do that? No, but I do think Teslaa can be a more consistent player, and I do think that will eat into the, quote, breakout for Jameson Williams.
Coach, what are your thoughts?
They gave up a lot to go get Teslaa. That says a lot about what they thought about him. His athletic measurables are off the charts. I thought when I first turned on his tape back in April, I was like, man, this kind of reminds me a little bit of Puka. There's a little bit of that in there, and that combined with the fact that nobody really knew about him coming out of college, and his playing style is similar, big, strong, physical, not afraid of contact. There's just a lot to like with Teslaa. And I think without a doubt, it's concerning for Jamo believers at minimum, right? Like there's an opportunity that Tesla's going to steal a little bit of that target share. And at minimum, he's going to play and he's going to get some opportunities. They've invested a lot in him. Like I really like Teslaa. Like we were stashing him like crazy early on.
I mean, he's 6'4", 214, man, and he uses that frame every bit of it.
Yeah, he had a nice touchdown yesterday. Let's talk about Williams a little bit here because that's the guy that's likely going to have the biggest impact, I would say, this year. Teslaa, I think, is a player that, as a rookie could have his moments and play really well, and he's somebody for dynasty purposes. But when we talk about Jameson Williams right now, wide receiver 27, he's going off the board at pick 59 in PPR scoring. You're talking about a player that's right behind Zay Flowers, right ahead of Tet McMillan, and you're looking at drafting Jameson Williams somewhere in the 5th round, maybe early 4th for Jameson Williams. And when we talk about Jamo, look, a slow start due to the injury and suspension. He kind of had a breakout last year, ending with 1,000 yards. He had 7 total touchdowns, and he's a big play player, kind of waiting to happen. He had a couple touchdowns of 50-plus yards. He averaged 17.3 yards per catch, and he finished as the top 12 fantasy wide receiver down the stretch. And really the biggest thing that was saving him is those big plays that he has had, but he's never been a huge volume guy. So maybe, I mean, I think the volume is not so important for Jamo. He can be a guy that can salvage a week on just one play alone, right? We saw it plenty of times last year, but I think the draw towards Jamo this year was we're expecting him to get a higher target share, more target volume, and I don't know if I don't want to sit here and overreact, so to speak, but it seems like this team really, really likes Isaac Tesla. And I think that there is a world where you have Sam Laporta, you have Jahmyr Gibbs, you now add Tesla. David Montgomery can still catch out of the backfield. He still has a solid floor for receptions. You have Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? And I think we were also banking on Ben Johnson leaving. Maybe there was a little bit of a different flavor for the new offensive coordinator. Jameson Williams, 91 targets last year, just 58 receptions. He's 17.3 yards per reception is hard to replicate. And if he can't bump up that volume on 58 receptions, he also had 7 touchdowns. So is there a possibility he repeats 7, or is there slight regression there too? So I think these are all important questions to raise about Jameson Williams. Before we jump over to the next player or just the next topic, I do want to ask you guys a question. And Coach, I'll start with you first since we started with Matt before. Jameson Williams or Tedarella McMillan, who would you prefer this year if you are drafting? It's Tet's one player behind Jamo. Tet's the wide receiver 29. Jameson Williams is wide receiver 28.
Yeah, I think I'm going to lean towards Tet a little bit here. I mean, I think he's a safer play. I can't believe I'm saying that about a rookie, right? But I feel like they have no choice but to throw him the football. Now, Jamo's usage has gone up, from year 1 to 2, and so there is that working in his favor. But you're right about Ben Johnson being out of town, and the Panthers invested so much in Tet that I just think they're going to target him like crazy because they don't have anybody else. So I've came around on Tet a little bit, believe it or not, there, Pete.
Yeah, I feel the same. Matt, I'm going to ask you the next one here because I already know Coach's answer. Would you rather Calvin Ridley or Jameson Williams? Because Calvin Ridley is currently wide receiver 34 on Sleeper. Jameson Williams, wide receiver 28. You're getting Calvin Ridley about almost 10 spots behind, eight spots, we'll say, behind Jameson Williams right now in ADP. Would you prefer to go Calvin Ridley over Jameson Williams?
It's Ridley easily for me. And for what it's worth, it would have been McMillan too. I think what Jameson Williams did last year is probably what we would see this year as well. There is some concern of Ben Johnson's being out of town. Does that kind of impact him? Does Jared Goff have some slight regression? Maybe they lean on the run game a little bit more. It's all possible, but I do think that Jameson Williams just kind of is what he is. If you go back and look at the box score, a lot of these games that he was fantasy relevant or produced for you, it's the games he scored a touchdown. If he didn't score, he was just kind of ho-hum. And that's kind of the story of Jameson Williams. He's a burner. It is what he is. It takes one play for him. So, those games where he scores 20-something points. The games where he doesn't, he's floating around 8 to 10. I think that Teslaa can eat into that opportunity. When we flip over and we look at Calvin Ridley did almost the exact same thing. He just had 3 less touchdowns. That's all that the difference is. Their stats are almost identical. 1,017 yards as opposed to 1,001 for Jameson Williams. And what I know about the Titans is the quarterback room is vastly better. I can't say enough about Cam Ward. I know Coach has said it for months. I'm all into. In my opinion, I'd rather have Calvin Ridley. He's cheaper, and I think there's a higher upside for Ridley. Plus, we've seen him do it. I mean, yes, I understand it was 5 years ago, but he was wide receiver 5. He's absolutely produced for fantasy. And I think him being the guy with Cam Ward is much better than Jameson Williams being the burner, possibly wide receiver 2, possibly wide receiver 3 in the Detroit offense.
Yeah, the last thing I would say here, and then we can move on, is with Ridley, too, you're getting more volume. He's a player that has commanded more volume his entire career. We just haven't seen that with Jameson Williams. Ridley had 120 targets last year, 136 the year before. And, I mean, this right now, if you're not the number one on your team, right, and there's a lot of playmakers around you, big playability is likely how you're going to make hay, which is what Jameson Williams has done. But volume is key in fantasy football, right? We know this, and especially if you want a safer floor. Otherwise, you're going to be left with a couple of weeks where you're kind of frustrated with the production. And Jameson Williams definitely has that, and Calvin Ridley is also in a room that, look, I like Tyler Lockett. But Tyler Lockett is not the same guy that he was a few years ago. You have Van Jefferson there. Now, Alec Manor has looked really, really good so far in training camp and had a nice showing the other day. But overall, I mean, you're not at a spot with these wide receivers where you could trust anyone outside of Ridley, where Jameson Williams has a ton of competition around him. The one thing I'll say about Jamo is in a couple weeks last year, week 3, he had 1.2 points. Week 7, he had 0.6 points, 9.6 points in week 13, 11.8 in week 12, 9.4. That was in the championship. But it's just, there's some inconsistencies there. And when I'm looking at his receptions last year, he only had one game over 6 catches, over 5 catches, and it was in week 18 when it didn't even matter for you. So I feel like that's super important to note. But let's move on to the next topic here, guys.